Good afternoon if you are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or Rochester, New York. Good evening if you are in Essen, Germany. Essen is one of my favorite towns because it means to eat. So, and greetings to people all around the world on all the continents where people watch Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. As you know, Adagio is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. My guest today is a wonderful singer. I'm not going to give you a voice category. I'll let you do that.
Okay.
Named Tobias Greenhalgh, originally from the United States, from Rochester, New York, but resident for a long time in Essen, Germany. You and I met in New York City when you were part of a group of three tall, handsome baritones who've all gone on to big careers. And you then moved to Europe.
hmm
And I'm suddenly forgetting about it. Stephen,
Stephen, the other baritones,
yes,
Stephen Labrie and Jarrett Ott.
Stephen Labrie, of course, and Jared Ott, all of whom have gone on to big careers, and you have as well. You have taken a career direction that uh, I've interviewed several Americans who have done this career route, namely education in the United States, forming your what I think is your versatility, your ability to jump into situations, to learn,
hmm
um, to adapt very quickly, but also having the security of a residence in Germany, in a country where
hmm
you have health care, you have a stable life, something that many singers who have families want, that kind of stable life.
Yes.
And even singers who are just not, they're not happy to roam. I'm not a singer, but I've worked in opera since 1972. I love to travel, and
hmm
I love sort of going to the next engagement. And Joan Sutherland and Richard Bonning loved the road, and they traveled constantly. Pavarotti was out on the road a lot. He had a couple of homes. But I fully understand why many singers want a stable life,
hmm
um, meaning a life where they're in the same place. There's um, a singer who I had on not too long ago, Tashina Vaughn, who raised a daughter in Germany, in Dresden mostly, and is a very established artist in Germany. When her daughter got to adulthood, Tashina then started taking engagements at the Met, elsewhere in North Carolina, where she's from, but basically is still a resident of Germany. And um, thank goodness for the Germans who have a system of opera houses where they produce all kinds of things. And this is really what I want to get into with you first, Tobias, is I happen to look on the roles that you've done in Essen. You're still a very young man. Um,
hmm
who've done so many roles and leading roles, character roles, feature roles. You've done title characters like the Barbara Seville Figaro.
Yep.
Um, you have done ensemble characters like Guglielmo and Così fan tutte. You've done Pose and Don Carlo, which is a major, wonderful
hmm
role in an ensemble. Morales and Carmen, Silvio in Pagliacci. Um, the whole range from practically walk-ons to the starring character.
Yes.
Talk about the experience of basically having to learn, prepare, and be ready to do all of these different roles of, whenever they come back into the repertory in Essen.
Sure. Well, I would say that for me, that started even before my time in Essen. Um, as a young lyric baritone, I feel that my way to advance my career, 10 years ago, was through my versatility. Especially, I would say, through the competitions I did. When I would show up 25 years old with a very light voice, fresh but light, um, how does that compare to a dramatic soprano or a dramatic tenor who is singing a high C and holding it when I'm singing a Mozart aria? Um, so I always try to lean into my versatility, my ability to use the language and use my body, my face, my performing skills. Like you said, I grew up in Rochester, and my first performing experience was in a Broadway musical, actually. My high school had an amazing Broadway musical department, and we had the best show choir in America for 25 years. We come to New York City and perform. So I come from this kind of theatrical base of performing. And so for me, and I really love acting as an art form, as well as singing, obviously. So I always tried to find my way through that to move forward. And so I would get offered everything, under the sun. And when you're 25, fresh out of Juilliard, I'm looking for work. I was interested to do anything because I like challenges. So I remember the first thing I did in Europe was Eugene Onegin. And at that time, I had sung a couple Russian songs at Juilliard, but other than that, really nothing. And I looked at the cast list, and everybody had a Slavic last name in the show, and they're all from like Poland, Lithuania, Russia. And so I was terrified, but I knew that if I could overcome that challenge through my own process, which I developed kind of on the fly, then it would help me through the next challenge, which was a Handel opera, which I had never done Baroque music. And that was also in Vienna, and Vienna's kind of a Baroque center in the world. So I just kind of used that on every project, and I kind of found the things that I naturally was good at and the things that I naturally was not good at. I would say that took more work or I didn't enjoy it. And over time, it's kind of built a repertoire, shall I say, of things that I feel I can do pretty well. And in Essen, it's a little bit more like a day-to-day job, which I like.
Right.
I have my own dressing room, my own locker. I go there every day. Even if I don't have anything to do, I'll go there. I'll put some hours in, practice, and I'm part of an institution, so I have some pride in that. It feels like a local football team or something. I'm like part of the Alto Theater, and the city of Essen loves this theater, and you feel that from the people. Even I train martial arts, and I'm involved.
Well, we're going to get to that.
Oh, we're going to do that. Okay, but I do something.
But I want to ask you about Evgeny Onegin.
Sure.
If you saw that the cast was largely Slavic and Eastern European, did you go to any of them and say, "Help me with this text"?
No, I did not.
So how did you come into the Russian?
So at the time I was actually at Wolf Trap. So it was funny. I was going from Vienna, Virginia to Vienna, Austria. That was
okay. Because we have an international listeners.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell them, or you can tell them, what is Wolf Trap?
Wolf Trap Opera is a wonderful young artist program not far from Washington, D.C. And they also have concerts and things, but they really pride themselves on helping young opera singers get their first experiences on a big stage, and to get a big amount of exposure and experience. And it was the same for me there. But I was there, and I went directly from Vienna, Virginia to Vienna, Austria. So while I was at Wolf Trap, I had a book and a CD on Russian diction that I got at Juilliard. And I literally, every time I would drive to the theater for my production at Wolf Trap, which was not Yevgeny Onegin, but I had to work on the next production, which was Yevgeny Onegin, I would listen over and over to just people saying like, Меня зовут Yevgeny Onegin, just to get the rhythm of the language and the diction. And I also had a phonetic alphabet guide, shall I say, for how to pronounce the words. And I just studied as much as I could until it was somewhat intelligible. And I showed up the first day, and everybody was very satisfied with my work. So, that was,
Well, that I'm certain, because you have a big career. And so, but it just, I mean, as you mentioned, you were talking about dramatic and coloratura sopranos. Certain singers and voices have their repertoire that might be largely in German or largely in Italian or sometimes in French. But yours ranges over many languages. And one thing to know about Germany, for people who don't, is that their opera houses present what we call Broadway musicals as part of the repertoire. So that I've seen Hello Dolly in Innsbruck, things like that.
Yes.
Um, and you were in My Fair Lady,
Yep.
and you played Freddie Eynsford Hill,
That's
who
correct.
has one of the best songs in the show, "The
Hmm.
Street Where She Lives."
Hmm.
And so there, in effect, you were playing on your home turf because you're part of the American musical theater tradition, as I am, as any American who loves this stuff is, whether we do
Hmm.
perform or not. And so therefore, did you find that colleagues who may have been German or Russian or whatever were coming to you and saying, talk to me about Henry Higgins, especially because My Fair Lady is a show about language.
Uh, for the funny thing about My Fair Lady in particular, that is like probably the most popular musical in Germany, I would say. But
Really?
they know it. Yeah, it's like it sells out every single time, which is why a lot of theaters do it. And but they know it in German, and they know the text in German. So they feel like I almost feel like Germans have a certain they feel like they have an ownership over that musical in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but to answer your question, if people come to me to ask questions, we recently did The Listeners by Missy Mazzioli here. And I also was the English diction coach for that show. So in that case, I was helping a lot of Germans get their American accents refined and how to sing that style because if you spend 20 years doing the repertoire of opera and then an opera like that comes an American opera comes to you and you've never seen that before, that style, it's kind of daunting. So I tried to be as helpful as I could because I've done many, obviously, Ricky and Gordon's music, many others in America. And so I felt I should at least try to help my colleagues. So yeah.
So for my audience, I was going to say listeners, but I don't want to confuse things. For my audience,
Hmm.
um, you can go back to October of 2024 and
Hmm.
find a conversation I did with Missy Mazzoli about The Listeners, which was just being launched at that point. And she's a fascinating person and a wonderful composer. Um, but therefore, this means that the Germans do My Fair Lady auf Deutsch.
Auf Deutsch.
How do you say meine schöne Frau? How do you say My Fair Lady in German?
Yeah, no, it's My Fair Lady auf Deutsch also, but
Okay.
yeah, my aria is called Auf die Straße wohnst du, where on the street where you live.
Wohnst du lebst?
Yeah, yeah. So
Um, but I mean, I have seen American musicals in the German speaking world
yeah,
in which the dialogue is in German,
yes,
but the songs are in English.
yes, yes.
I've often walked down the street before. So you sing it entirely in German.
Dialogues in German, everything in German.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm sticking with My Fair Lady because it is a show about language more
Yes.
than just about any musical I can think of. It's about how Eliza Doolittle, who sells flowers outside Covent Garden Opera House,
Hmm.
is discovered by Henry Higgins, who disapproves of her accent and tries to turn her into a lady.
Yes.
But he's a curmudgeon and he's all kinds of things. Um, and it's very sexist. It was written by George Bernard Shaw in the
Yeah.
1930s as Pygmalion. It's one of the great films with Wendy Hiller and Leslie Howard.
Yeah. Hmm.
Even more than My Fair Lady with Audrey Hepburn and Rex Harrison. I love Pygmalion. But it certainly is of its time and very classist about the upper classes, the lower classes, but it's beloved for its music and the journey, let's call it, of Eliza and to some degree of Henry Higgins. Um, but how in German do they explore the the finesses of accent, of class, of speech at a time when, frankly, in Germany, there's, correct me if I'm wrong, there are not the same distinctions as one would find in Great Britain, which more than any place else
Hmm.
still talks about people by their class. In
Yes.
America, we don't have class. We don't talk about that.
Yes.
But in Great Britain, among the first things is if I speak with an accent, they say, oh, so you're middle class, you're lower class, or you're
Right.
not high class. You didn't go to Oxford, whatever.
Right.
Um, it's identified through speech. So how does that work when the language is German?
Well, it's interesting you asked that. We had a very particular production dealing with that theme. And as you know, there's a big debate in Germany about immigration. And the director of the piece wanted to make Eliza Doolittle an immigrant from either the Middle East or Africa. They had multiple girls play it. So one was from South Africa, one was from Brazil, and one was from Serbia.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had their own distinct accent, and
Mm.
they were encouraged to use that, even though they spoke German perfectly. They have an accent, as I do too, and they were encouraged to play that up. So Higgins was your, you know, normal older tough German guy,
From
and
Hanover.
from from Hanover, yeah, and the whole piece was modernized to make it about immigration, more or less.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's how, and it worked. So it was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You know, you remind me of something. I moved to Italy when I was 17
yeah. Okay.
and did not speak Italian. And the little town, and it was a little town that I lived in Tuscany,
Hmm.
was had a beach, and the entire town of about 150 people gathered on the beach every Friday night, and they showed a film. They basically put up a sheet. It was not even
Hmm.
a screen, and projected it. And it was usually an American film that was dubbed, so that I knew the dialogue.
Mm.
Um, the first film I saw was called Prendi I soldi e scappa, Take the Money and Run by Woody Allen, which was then a contemporary film. But a few weeks later, they had Via col Vento, Gone with the Wind. And by then I spoke some Italian,
Hmm.
most Italian that I learned on the streets of the town with these very lovely people. And afterwards I asked, I think that Scarlett O'Hara spoke sort of Milanese Italian, and Rhett Butler spoke sort of Venetian or Genoese, in other words, by the sea Italian.
Hmm.
And Mammy sounded like she was from Naples, and Miss, I think the character is the Butterfly McQueen. Miss Scarlet, I don't know nothing about birth and babies, was Sicilian,
Mm.
and some of the workers might have been from Abruzzo and so on.
Mm.
Because in Italy there are very identifiable accents from throughout the country, but they decided that Scarlett O'Hara was from Milan. In
Okay.
other words, sort of, a bit upper class and snooty, and that Rhett Butler was from probably a seaport and a little, elegant, rougher, but still, you know, the North.
Hmm.
And this is when these assumptions were made that if you're from the North, you're better, which is stupid.
Yeah.
But there was that mentality. So that's when I first learned about Italian regionalism
Yes.
and the degree to which it becomes shorthand
Hmm.
for a whole personality.
Yeah.
And so since then, as I've learned languages and I'm fluent now in Italian, I am very sensitive to the notion of accents and speech and so on, because it is shorthand. And frankly, a lot of times
Yeah.
people make assumptions. Best doctor I ever had in Italy was from Sicily. And, from southern Italy, trained completely in Sicily. And I would not change him for a moment.
Hmm.
But there are many Italians, less so now, but when I was a kid, who basically assumed that anything south of about Florence, you just didn't go there if you lived in Milan or Venice or Verona. And
Yeah.
we have to get over that. But therefore, I'm interested because I love how you describe the way My Fair Lady was done. I think it's
Yeah.
not only an elegant solution, but an interesting solution
Oh,
that
sure. Yeah.
addresses the context of the show without becoming a sort of a method or a hook to hang it on. But really, someone thought it through.
Yeah.
Now, if Essen, the theater in Essen, which is called the Alto Musiktheater Essen,
Hmm.
how many different works do they do in a year?
Um, hmm. Well, each season we have, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but we have, I would say, 5 or 6 Wiederaufnahmen, which is basically a production that's in the repertory. So it'll come back. They save the set, they save the costumes,
A revival. Yeah.
a revival. I forget the words in English. I've been over here.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah. But and then each season, I would say every month, every month and a half or month comes out with a new production. So a new interpretation of a piece or a world premiere or a European premiere. There's a lot of things going on every day. Something's happening, multiple things. So it's
remarkable.
Yeah.
But therefore, they have to create a rehearsal schedule for all of you in the ensemble.
Oh yeah.
So that you're not worn out, because if you're rehearsing all day at Valentin and Faust, but then you're singing Posa that night in Don Carlo, you need to rest.
Yes. We actually have certain rights about that, and we can use them or we can not use them. So another benefit of working in an institution and in Germany, where they look out for the workers' rights. So it's great. Yeah.
I want to talk about Essen a bit. I tend to think of it as western to northwestern Germany. It's not Hamburg. It's not that far north.
No.
But I believe it's north of Frankfurt.
It is north of Frankfurt by about 2.5, 3 hours. Yes.
Okay. So it's near Cologne.
It's Cologne. If you're coming from Frankfurt up, if you're going north, you go through, I don't know if you've ever been on a train ride in this area, but you go
Many.
Okay, so you would know that you go along the Rhine River and you get these wonderful castles and wine country and et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden it flattens out and it just becomes a kind of post-industrial wasteland. That is called the Ruhrgebiet, and Cologne is, yes. And Gebiet means region in German. And it is this amalgamation of, I don't know, 40, 50 smaller cities in one area where there was a lot of coal plants and steel and a lot of other industry. And cities like Essen, Dusseldorf, Cologne, Hagen, Gelsenkirchen popped up and became quite rich. Unfortunately, they're all completely flattened during the war, World War II, because it was the industrial section of Germany. But each city here has their own opera house. You can go directly from where I live. I can go in any direction, 20 miles, and I can get an opera house or two. So it's really alive and thriving in terms of opera, which is wonderful. In terms of the aesthetics, it's probably, I hate to say it because I live here, but it's probably the ugliest place in Europe I've ever been. But there's a certain culture. Yeah.
It's a combination of industry. I have a very good friend from Essen, so I know Essen.
Okay. Yes.
His name is Bruno. And, but have you been to Gelsenkirchen?
I work in Gelsenkirchen. Yeah. Not
okay, so
yeah, I go there regularly. I'll be there.
At the beginning of my career, one of the first artists I got to really work with a lot, who became a friend, and I adore her. She recently turned 91, is Marilyn Horne.
Oh, sure.
And the way you are in Essen at the beginning of your career and building a home, Marilyn Horne was in Gelsenkirchen. That was her
Really? Okay.
Her first job in Europe was Gelsenkirchen.
Okay.
And she would do Brunhilde, Isolde, Marian Wozzeck, Rossini. She would do it all. She would do soprano and mezzo soprano because she could. Yeah. But they were sort of testing her range, and there are old pirate recordings one can find of her doing the big Wagner roles when she was about 25 or 26, which is crazy, but that's what they were doing then.
Yeah.
And there was not so much the Bach. It's not that I believe in it, but Bach, there are some singers who do a sort of classic repertory congenial to their voice type and their look, but other singers are Fachless. Basically, they do what works for the Joyce DiDonato. I think is an example of that.
Sure.
Who does all kinds of wonderful roles in all kinds of areas. But Jesse Norman was that way. And so there are singers who are that way. And I'm not taking one side or the other, but it is true that in the German system at the beginning of a young artist's career, especially for an American who's coming to learn, someone like Marilyn Horne sucked it all in and learned everything she could in Gelsenkirchen. And when I have met a few very elderly people from Gelsenkirchen, they say, I heard Marilyn Horne in 1957.
Wow.
Yeah, and they did.
Yeah.
They were young people then, perhaps even teenagers,
Yeah.
having been born, let's say, about 1942 or 43. And so they were that memories of World War II as a small child. They remember
Yes.
the Reconstruction, the rubble,
Yes.
but they also remember that they were taken to the opera very often as
Yes.
children, which is a very
Yes.
important thing.
Yes.
So that means that years from now, people will say that they heard Tobias Greenhalgh when he was in the early phases of his career in Essen,
Could be.
because while you primarily are there, and I think it's a good thing, and I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
I have not heard you sing in Essen, but I have heard you sing in New York
Mm-hmm.
and in Aix-en-Provence in France.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to New York first. You were at the Juilliard School. You then did this concert at what's called Wild Recital Hall with Stephen Labrie and Jared Off. I remember this time.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you three get together? Because it seemed a bit of a marketing thing because you're all tall and handsome
We all
and
worked.
baritones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. We all worked and knew Glenn Rovin, the late Glenn Rovin.
Oh,
And
yes. Yeah.
yes, and
Please talk about Glenn Rovin. I'm glad that his name came up. Yeah.
yeah, sure. And he had heard me at some small concert in Brooklyn. I forget exactly which one, but he came up and said, "I want to start working with you, doing projects." And I was very excited to do it. He had his own recording studio. He was really passionate about getting new music out there, and I really liked. He had a good energy about that. And I was traveling around. I think I was in Vienna at the time, and he said he would like to do a CD with Stephen, Jarrett, and I knew both Stephen and Jarrett pretty well. We had crossed paths many times. Both great guys, amazing singers. So I was really
Yeah.
happy, and
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea." It'll be fun from my perspective. It's fun, and it kind of is a marketing thing, but I mean, marketing sells tickets.
It
So
does.
and so we made a CD together. I actually recorded everything on my own because I was traveling too much and we couldn't find a time to meet up. They recorded separate times, and we made the date for the concert, and we were all in New York and made it happen. Yeah, we met each other there, you and I.
So you you didn't know these guys before the concert. I
No,
mean, you didn't.
yeah, we didn't sing together, but I had
You
known
knew
them
them.
personally.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Talk more about Glenn Rovin because he died suddenly. I don't frankly know of what, but it was not
I,
COVID. It was before COVID.
it was right
And
after our concert, actually, which was really
yeah,
tragic and hard to understand because he was very healthy and very happy. And we thought this was the beginning of many things. We actually thought there would be more three baritones things.
right.
And it just kind of happened and took us all by surprise. So, it was a very tragic, was very sad.
He was one of these people in the music business, not just in America, but in every major city in the world that has a music community, who not everyone knew, but those who knew him were gratified to know him
Yes. Yes.
because he was a music humanitarian. He would
Yes.
find ways to use music to promote peace, promote better feeling among people, to
Yes.
give opportunities to people just starting out who
Yeah.
he recognizes as having talent. And I don't know if he had money or not. I don't think he particularly did, but he somehow managed to always raise money to
Yep.
make things happen for other people, which was a
Yeah.
wonderful thing. And that's why his sudden death, which was, I'm just going to say, it was not a suicide. It was some
Yeah.
quick medical thing like an aneurysm or a heart attack. I don't know. But it was
Yeah.
one of those kind of things. Was so shocking because everyone here in New York knew him if you
Hmm.
were sick. And he had just done the concert with the three of you, and then suddenly he died. And
Yeah.
and therefore, one of the things I like to do in this program, when the occasion arises, is to remember people who were too quickly forgotten,
Yeah.
because they didn't necessarily have a means of perpetuating their own legacy,
Yep.
and except by investing in people like you,
Yeah.
which is
Yes.
a definite part of his legacy. So Glenn Roven, Roven, Glenn Glen, for people who are interested, is worth looking up.
Absolutely.
Now, um, then you and I reconnected in Aix-en-Provence in the summer of 2018. I was working there at the festival. I was teaching a symposium. It was the first time I heard Lisa Davidson,
Hmm.
who was
That's
just
right.
starting out, even though it seems like not long ago, but it was 2018. And she was singing Ariadne,
Hmm.
and she was spectacular in a terrible production, but she was spectacular. I don't know if you saw that production, but
I think I missed it.
it was, it did not make sense. I'll politely say that it did not make sense at all. But she was amazing. Her
Yeah.
singing was just spectacular, and after that, I just sort of felt I had to hear everything that Lisa Davidson does wherever she goes. Um, but you were Aeneas in Dido and Aeneas.
Hmm.
And I'll say it because you won't. You were wonderful.
Thank you.
You were kind of perfect in that role. And it was a very moving production the night that I saw it. The weather was just perfect. Everything about the
Mm.
environment of the Aix-en-Provence Festival was terrific.
Mm.
And talk about your experience at X. How did you wind up there? Because it's one of the top festivals in the world. You are a
Yeah.
young man. You were a younger man then.
Yeah. I
And
was.
how did you wind up 7, 8 years ago, whatever it is now, as the title character and as Aeneas and Dido and Aeneas by Purcell?
Um, I made an audition for the Aix-en-Provence intendant while I was a young artist in Vienna. And funny enough, the audition was the same day as one of the performances of Eugene Onegin. And I really didn't want to do that, but it was the only time that he could hear me. So it was like 11 in the morning. It was cold outside. I didn't sleep very well, I remember, because I was kind of not looking forward to it that day. And I remember I went in and I thought I did pretty well, but I wasn't really satisfied with how I auditioned. And he didn't really say anything. But then he also came to my performance that night as Yegin, and is the only time while I worked at the Théâtre Under Wien, I was a young artist there, where I forgot some of the words in a role. And maybe it's because it was Russian. Probably nobody knew, but I knew, and my confidence was kind of broken.
They
And
knew in the eastern part of Vienna. They knew.
yeah, exactly. And I thought to myself, oh, there's no chance I'll ever go to Aix-en-Provence. And then skip forward, I think 2 years it was, and I was flying from Hong Kong to Budapest, and that was the weirdest flight I've ever done. And I was in an airport doing a transfer, and I got a phone call from my agent, Guy Barzilay, and he was like, on through Wi-Fi phone call, and he was like, "Hey, you want to sing Aeneas and Aix-en-Provence this summer?" I was like, "Woo, that's so cool! Yes, I do." And they remembered me, and they kind of kept track of what I was doing, and yeah, so it came to be that way. And I had sung the role at Juilliard in my undergraduate, so I knew that it worked, and yeah, so that's how it came to be.
So when we talk about a theater such as Essen, which has I don't want to call it a machine, it's a well-oiled, very effective German machine, but
Yeah,
things are produced a lot in a short period of time. Aix-en-Provence may mount 4 operas in a season,
right.
but the season's over a long period of time. And unless you disagree with me, I would say that the rehearsal schedule is generous.
Very
The
good.
time
Yes.
spent on doing the theatrical elements of a production are
Oh yeah.
there. It's not a jump in where you're suddenly singing Aeneas.
No.
Talk about the experience as a then very young artist
Hmm.
in being in this festival environment where the workings were different from perhaps everything you knew before.
Well, I remember specifically in Aix-en-Provence because I had never. I don't think I'd ever sung in France. That was my first time singing in France, but I had done a lot of work in Europe, so I kind of had this and England. I sung Glyndebourne shortly before that, and I had this mentality of, oh, I'm just another country in Europe, and another festival. Yeah, because I don't,
France.
yeah, just But I remember distinctly being there and thinking to myself, this is not what I expected. Not in a bad way. It was more. It was much grander than I imagined. And normally, uh, actually, the production I was part of was part of their kind of young sing. It wasn't a young artist program, but it was like they do an opera for younger singers in the lead roles.
Mhm.
And normally they do that opera in like a little chamber theater, but for some reason they did it on the main stage, and
Yes.
that made my experience even more. And it's outdoors, even more. It was a little overwhelming at times, I must say, but it pushed me to become better and to really take it seriously. And yeah, I had an amazing time. I really loved it, and of course, it's just such a beautiful atmosphere in general. Like you said, you really feel there's something in the air about the music and the theater and you know how people are enjoying life. It's really wonderful.
Well, the air was very beautiful, very warm, not hot,
Yeah.
but very beautiful. The French, when they organize things well, organize them beautifully. Um, we happened to be there, you and I, and my group that was studying with me, on the 14th of July, which is the French national holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And France was playing in the World Cup. I forget against whom.
I
It might
remember.
have been Croatia,
Yes. Yes.
perhaps. And so, but you didn't, but I had an opera that night. We had the
Okay.
Flirts, I think. So, or no, it was The Fiery Angel by Prokofiev.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Which was the opera I knew least of the four shows that I was involved in. And so I really had to be on my toes with The Fiery Angel. And what was remarkable was that the audience that came for The Fiery Angel watched the opera, but the second we came out, all discussion turned to what was happening in the World Cup final. It was a Sunday, and France won, so therefore the whole city was celebrating, but not well, I was going to say not in a crazy way, as in not like Philadelphia or certain fan cities in America and perhaps Manchester in the UK. There are certain cities that celebrate really a lot and go a bit off the charts. But it was all very civilized. I remember it was warm and people were running around with not much clothing on, but just enough. But they had French, flags painted all over their bodies.
Yes.
And it was very pleasant because it was not raucous. It
Yeah.
was happy, but there
Yes.
was no sense of danger about anything going on. And
No.
I remember thinking that if we were in Paris, it might have been different, or
Yes.
Marseille. But being in a beautiful, historic, medium-sized French city in the south of France, in perfect weather, was
Mm-hmm.
just the right thing. Now, another thing that you and I did, I invited you to a cooking class.
I remember that. Yes.
So, because I wanted my group, because I write cookbooks, so I wanted my group to learn Provençal cooking.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody got to meet you.
Yeah.
Having heard you, they then got to meet you. Um, I remember the setting very well. It was sort of under an overhang, and
Yeah.
again, the weather was perfect, and there were flowers blooming, and the chef was cutting herbs, and we sort of migrated around to different tables to see the different things. Did not have the intensity of a lot of cooking classes I'm in, where you feel like
Mm.
it's a competition. It was
Yes.
just
It was pleasant.
civility. I think the word
Yeah.
is civility.
Civility. Yeah. I
And
had
what
a
I
really
kept
good time.
feeling the whole week was civility.
Yeah.
That they were not boring by any stretch of imagination, but they really enjoyed life and pleasure and art and music and food
Yes.
and sports. And without going into it, I had a medical issue there, and I was so beautifully taken care of
Yeah.
that when I came back to the States and went to my own doctor, he said, "You were lucky that you had this done in France because they did
Mm.
such a good job in a
Wow.
way that in America we don't have certain medications that Europeans do." He said I was actually lucky to have the problem I had in France
Wow.
because the care I got,
Yeah.
despite everything going on.
Yeah.
And that's civility too. I walked into a pharmacy. I told the pharmacist the problem I thought I was having. He picked up the phone. He called the doctor. I went to the doctor. The doctor treated me.
Hmm.
prescribed a prescription. I went back to the pharmacy. Everything low key and everything beautifully done with no panic, no alarm, no bureaucracy.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking that summer how much we Americans, I'm not going to speak for any other country, can learn from that kind of approach.
Yeah.
That France is not perfect, but they understand that if the quality of life remains good for most people, it should be all people, um, other things take care of themselves.
Yes.
So
That's
that
precisely.
making opera ticket prices affordable for most people means that opera is open to more people.
Yes.
It's not viewed as prohibitive and exclusive or whatever. Um, they can get away with that horrible production of Ariadne of Naxos because that's such a wonderful cast. But they're allowed to try that too. There are terrible productions in other countries as well. Um, you mentioned that you have worked with contemporaries and living composers,
Hmm.
such as Missy Mazzoli, but also Ricky Ian Gordon.
Yes.
Now, Ricky was on the show maybe 3 years ago.
Hmm.
His latest work then was called Intimate Apparel, which was done at Lincoln Center. A
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful work that I hope finds its place in repertory. And because I like him, I just got his new book, which is called Seeing Through. It has just been published. I've not opened it yet, so I can't tell you how it is. But, I have limited time, so I pick my books carefully to read. And talk about Ricky and talk about the Opera 27, which I did not see.
Yes. Ricky and I met while I was a young artist at Opera Theater St. Louis, and I did a couple small concerts with him playing piano. We immediately hit it off. As I said, coming from the Broadway musical background, he comes from that too. There's just an instant understanding, shall I say. Um, and then I was given the opportunity to do 27, uh, world premiere of his with Stephanie Blythe playing Gertrude Stein, which,
That's right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I got to play Leo Stein, her brother. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, and I really, that was such an amazing experience in general. Um, 6, 7 months before the production even started, I was flown to New York to take a photo to be on the cover of Opera News magazine when I was, 24 years old, and I hadn't
Yeah.
done any work. I mean, I didn't deserve that at all. So it was wonderful. And then when we came to St. Louis, we all kind of knew we had something special. Each of us really put the work in, not only in the singing department, but I myself did a lot of research and really got into that time period of Paris and became obsessed with it. I still am. And we had James Robinson was the director, amazing,
Oh.
amazing director, obviously. And we just had a really good synergy between the characters. There were only 5 characters in the show. And there were 3 men, myself, Daniel Brevik, bass baritone, and Theo LeBeau, tenor. And we had to play like, I don't know, each of us played like 5 roles in a 90-minute opera, no intermission. So we were constantly changing our clothes backstage. One minute I'm a World War I doughboy, then I was Man Ray, the photographer, then I was Leo Stein, then I was just this like neutral character that was changing the set. And then the 3 of us had to go and drag in one scene, which was very funny. And it was a really moving piece. And of course, Stephanie Blythe was the perfect singer, maybe in all of
Yeah.
her, to play Gertrude Stein. And she just crushed it. And so it was amazing. We made a recording with Albany
Was
Records.
there an Alice B. Toklas character?
There was an Alice B. Toklas character. Yeah, Elizabeth Futrall played Alice B. Toklas.
Oh, lovely.
She was
A
also,
soprano.
yeah, it
Soprano.
was,
Okay.
yeah. For me, it was to have those two there, and I was friends with Theo and Daniel offstage even before
Yeah.
that. So it was just such a wonderful experience. I really, and Michael Christie was the conductor. So
Excellent.
yeah, yeah, it was a great team. Yeah,
Why was it called 27?
because she lived in the apartment 27 Rue de Fleuris in Paris.
Okay.
It was because the apartment was the setting for the opera, more or less. Yeah.
You see, when I see the number 27, I think of my beloved Giuseppe Verdi
Ah,
because there's a group in Parma called the Club of the 27.
okay.
One man, and they're only men. They don't keep women out, but women have formed their own club.
Right.
So it's remained a man's club, although, as to be very clear, they've never tried to keep women away. but the
Hmm.
women just said, we're going to be our own Verdi women, ladies, and these are the men. And each man represents a different opera. And
Mm,
it's a job to know everything about that opera. And the man I'm closest to is Falstaff
hmm.
and Paolo, and he knows everything about the opera Falstaff. And I
Hmm.
remember that when I went to the club for the first time, it's a big honor to go there and talk about Verdi on a Thursday night, and you have a wonderful Parma dinner with fantastic food. That the men cook, the men clean, the men serve. At that time, Il Trovatore was the president of the club, and La Traviata was the woman cook with the man cooking in the kitchen, and Alcira was the server. And Alcira kept bringing, and I said to Alcira, I said, does anyone ever ask you about Alcira, probably the least known opera by Giuseppe Verdi? And he said, I have to be ready just in case someone does,
Mm.
because everybody talks to Otello and Falstaff and Aida, but no one talks to me.
Great.
But
Yeah.
that's why I thought of 27. But
Okay.
I will look for the opera 27 because it sounds like a wonderful work. And Ricky Ian
Yeah.
Gordon's a marvelous composer
Oh yeah, he's
who
fantastic.
composes all across genres from quote serious opera, whatever that is, to Broadway musicals that are dramatic or comedic, to
Hmm.
wonderful songs that singers love singing. He's a treasure. So, and that's why I got his book, and I have not cracked it open even, but Seeing Through is the title. That's a nice red cover, and
Hmm.
I plan to read it soon. Now, um, you and I correspond occasionally,
Hmm.
and you mentioned to me that recently you're sticking your big toe into some tenor music.
This is true.
Now, did you stick your own toe in, or did someone ask you to do that?
Nobody asked me. This is completely on my own volition. Um, I I'll start by saying this. Uh, I've always kind of had an interest. Maybe at some point, I knew, even as a young singer, that it was either going to go dramatic in the more dramatic baritone section way or the dramatic tenor way. But I never, since I only sing baritone, only sung baritone up until this point, I didn't really consider taking on held in tenor repertoire. But whenever I get the chance to sing a high A, an optional high A in an opera, I always do it. And everybody always comes up to me and they're like, that was incredible. You need to do more of that. I'd pay to hear that. That's what everybody always says. And so including my wife. So, and she's also a very good singer. So I take her
Well,
opinion.
we're going to get to her. I'm not forgetting her.
And, and so I always had it in the back of my mind. And in 2021, I recognized that I had a tongue tie, okay, and I never had it cut. So my tongue was, I had this a band from
The
here to
frenulum.
the frenulum. Yes, thank you.
You know
And
that you're talking to someone else who had that? That's
really,
why I know the frenulum. Okay,
okay,
let's get into who knew,
who knew?
Tobias. I've eaten with you. I've heard you sing, but we never got into the frenulum.
Yeah,
Let's get very anatomical about the mouth,
I
because
would love
I
to.
too, as
Yeah.
a small boy, was a very late speaker, and they were worried because they thought I had cognitive issues and whatever. They thought I
Mhm.
might have been deaf, and they would snap their fingers next to me, and I would turn my head to the finger snapping. I could
Mhm.
make sounds, but I could not form words.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I finished a production here, and this was directly after coronavirus. So I hadn't sung on stage in a year or so, and I just felt like I needed to something wasn't feeling right. I don't know what it was. And after I finished a production here, and I had the summer free, and not thank God for the German health system. I just went to the
Yes.
doctor, and I was like, I went asked the doctor, can I get this cut? Because I did some research. I spoke to my voice teacher, Sherman Lowe. He connected me to a couple specialists that I talked to on the phone, and they're like, "Yeah, that's probably actually good for your voice if you cut that." Because what I recognized is that my tongue being in that fixed position was keeping my larynx in a high position, which, as a baritone in particular, is not completely ideal. So more or less, I've been singing with a handicap my entire life.
Yeah, yeah, I
I,
know.
yeah. So once it went, which was very funny when I went to the doctor because I was very self-aware the day of the surgery, and I told them everything, and they're very, very professional, very nice. It was a university clinic, so it was kind of younger doctors, and they were very interested in this. And I said, uh, when I when you cut my tongue, I'm going to sing a note just to feel. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm in this, surgery room, have in a gown and everything, and all novocained up all over my face, in
Yeah.
my mouth. And they lifted my tongue and they cut it, and I saw a little bit of blood, but I couldn't feel anything. I was like, Doc, hold on a second. No, whoa, it was different. And I'm not joking.
Uh-huh.
I felt two muscles right here drop.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, but something changed. And since that happened, I had to discover it, of course. It's not, my body had to catch up with the freedom.
Yeah.
But I've had an ability to sing open that I never had before. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought at the beginning that my voice was going to go deeper, but it actually went the other way. My voice started to go higher. It also went deeper. It went in both directions, but I started to get this like freaky power in my top range,
Yeah.
and I was like, "This needs to be utilized." I've sung 55 roles as a baritone, and I'm 35
Wow.
years old, and I'm like, I could continue singing Papageno every 2 years. I could continue singing Don Giovanni every 3 years, and I love those roles. And I hope that someday maybe I get the chance to do them again, as an older man, kind of how Placido Domingo has done. He became a baritone in his later years,
You
but
have to take care of your knees.
have to take care.
It's not the voice, it's the knees.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. With those roles, you can hurt yourself
Yeah.
physically. But I was visiting my wife. She was singing in Frankfurt, and I don't know. I was just relaxing in the apartment she had rented there, and I started listening to Siegmund, the aria, and I just was in the bathroom like emulating these guys. And my wife was like, "Hey, that guy sounds like you," and I was like, "Really?" And I could sing Siegmund without warming up, just emulating. And I was like, "Wait a second, that is not normal. I should take this seriously." So then over the past year, I started with Siegmund, Parsifal, just at the end of a coaching for my baritone repertoire. I'd just throw Siegmund in front of the pianist and be like, can I just try this? And every time it felt better and better. Then I started to take some lessons with a teacher here, um, and just started to get into it. And it just kind of is growing into this obsession in a good way. And at this point, in January, I had my first public performance in Essen. I had a small concert for about
I heard it.
100 people. Yeah, I sang Siegmund and Parsifal,
Yep.
and it was great. And people were thrilled, and I was thrilled. And I was like, I get this. This is what I
Yep.
should be doing. And so I'd like to take my career in this direction because I think I could maximize my potential more than I would as a lyric baritone. And
So
yeah,
I have a technical frenulum question for you.
sure.
Given that I've never spoken to another person who had this
Really?
condition that I had, and I always have to explain it to people, because I was a very little boy and was not
Mhm.
yet forming words, but apparently absorbed a lot of language. Here we are, language again.
Yeah.
Um, when they did the procedure, I mean, I don't remember that, but I do remember vividly that I was taken for speech therapy and I had to be trained to speak because
Mm-hmm.
my tongue at that point was not getting any exercise, so that I could not lift the tongue to the back teeth, which I didn't really have teeth, but lift it up there to form the T, the D,
Yep.
those sounds. I could do the the M sounds, and the sounds, but not the T and the D and the L, certain tongue placement. And I remember she used carrot sticks and breadsticks and so forth, and basically had me do push-ups with my tongue
Yep.
to strengthen the tongue. And I would do these
Yep.
an hour a day
Yep.
until I had some tongue strength. And I went from not speaking to speaking sort of classic American broadcaster speech because that's what she taught me,
Yep.
which meant that when I was 5 and 6, I was already doing public speaking in
Mm-hmm.
a very neutral, classic American broadcaster speech. I never spoke as a child. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have baby talk. I didn't learn words, in cute little children way. I learned broadcasting speech. But what I later discovered when I tried to learn other languages was that I was so completely formed in terms of my vowels and my consonants in classic American English speech that I
Hmm.
cannot roll my Italian R. I can speak fluent Italian, but then when you have a word like prego,
Yeah.
or
Prego.
Verona,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to fake the R, which
Yes.
I will never get in French in any other language, the R, and
Yes.
certain other letters as well. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But when Europeans say to me, "Oh, you're an American," I can tell. How can you tell? You're R.
Yep.
And
Always the
then I
R.
want to say, but check out my vocabulary.
Yeah.
And I can talk to you about anything about in your country, about your language,
Yeah.
about your culture. But
Yep.
it is notable
Hmm.
that I'm aware all the time, and now that I'm thinking about it, where I just placed my tongue when I said all the time,
Yep.
that I had to learn this. So I was a little boy,
Yep.
but if you were in your 30s when this was done,
Yep.
what did you have to learn or unlearn because you're already out in life and your career
Yes.
and you're a singer and you use your voice, you use speech?
Hmm.
What did you
Yeah.
have to learn?
Well, I timed it so that it was directly before our 2 month summer break. And that was intentional. I didn't want to do it during the season. And I had a lighter opera at the beginning of the next season. So in case there was some problem, I could, figure out a way to do it. I was worried about the speech, but I was also more worried about what maybe would destroy my singing voice. That was just in the
Hmm.
back of my mind. Even though people told me it's not going to do that, I still thought about that, obviously. But in terms of the speech, I really didn't have any problems relearning. I did a bunch of tongue exercises, just
Yeah,
moving different directions, stretching it out,
right.
back up, back up. But it really was, I didn't notice anything actually. It was so, I was quite thankful for that, that it really just immediately was back to normal. I mean, of course, it had to heal, but once it was healed, it was just, I noticed it was like a tongue 2.0, more or less.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this leads to what is a serious question. In the German medical system, is
mhm.
dental care included in your care?
uh, if you have an emergency, yes.
Uh-huh.
Like if it's something, if you need to have like a tooth taken out because it's
Right.
causing severe pain, or
Infection.
that's taken care of, and you get two cleanings a year. Other than that, if you want anything extra, you got to pay for it yourself. Yeah.
Because, frankly, as a singer, as a speaker, where we place our tongue, the teeth have to be in good shape as well. And I spend a
Oh yeah.
fortune on dental care because um, it's essential for my work.
Yes. Yep.
And, somehow in America, in the medical system, they've decided that the mouth is not part of the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
Even though dental conditions can often foretell heart disease, diabetes, you have to check for cancers and so on.
Sure.
It is part of the body.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And especially singers, where many singers have acid reflux.
Yeah.
And that can burn the esophagus and create problems in the mouth. Um, I'm not getting political here, but I just am putting this out there. The mouth is part of the body and
I
should be
agree.
taken care of as a medical situation and not
Absolutely.
an aesthetic, pretty white teeth smile situation. It's medical. All right,
Absolutely.
good to know. So, I wanted to talk to you about your wife. Um,
Sure.
the first thing, I don't know if it's pronounced Julia or Yulia.
Uh, if you're going to be completely correct, it's Yulia
That's
Muzichenko.
what I thought. Okay. So say her last name correctly.
Muzichenko, which in Ukrainian means music.
I know that. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. It's actually her last name too. So yeah,
Julia Music. It's a wonderful name.
yeah.
Um, so in November, I had a guest on this program, Dervla Collins, who's the artistic director of the Veronica Dunn International
Mhm,
Music
mhm.
foundation. I years ago taught a master class with Veronica Dunn, which was unforgettable. She was Ireland's singing teacher, and very wisely in Ireland at the Royal Irish Academy of Music, they used Veronica to teach not just singers, but other teachers. So therefore, her method has been passed on throughout Ireland, and not just at the Royal Academy, but in high schools and other places where people learn to sing. It's a remarkable thing, and they've created an international singing competition that she was still alive for and was on, I think, the first and maybe second jury. But now Dervla Collins is in charge. And who won?
Yulia Muzichenko-Greenhalgh won.
What did she sing?
She sang in the finals, which I was present for. She started with Manon, and then she did Rondine by Puccini. A beautiful aria. I'd never heard it before, actually. And she finished with her staple, which is La Traviata, which she does all over the world. And I was the proudest husband in the world that day.
So talk about the whole experience of not singing in the competition, but someone who loves singing in the competition. What does that feel like? You were in the hall.
Well,
was
this
it at the National Theater? Where was it held in Dublin?
This was in the National Concert Hall in Ireland.
National Concert Hall.
But I have to say that we've been together since 2019. Funny enough, we met in the south of France in Montpellier. We did a production of Don Pasquale together, and we fell in love, and now we're married. And we during her career,
I'm trying to remember. Is his name Ernesto, the baritone?
No, Malatesta.
Malatesta, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. The tenor is Ernesto. You'll sing him one day too.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. Maybe I'll need I'll need another tongue surgery to sing that. But basically, I've done a couple competitions and had some success. But my wife is extraordinarily good as an opera singer in productions, but she's phenomenal also as a competition singer. She just has a special talent to win. And so I've been to maybe 5 competitions, and I always go. I also teach voice lessons on the side, and I really enjoy coaching. And like I said, I was the diction coach. I really enjoy the process of optimizing a singer's performance. So I'll go and I'll listen and I'll hear all the other singers, and I give her the advice on what would help her stand out, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, she won, and it was fantastic. It was. I didn't see the first. I think there were 3 rounds. I didn't see those. I was busy here with the listeners and My Fair Lady. Funny enough, but then I went to Ireland and arrived. And just as I arrived, she was in this fancy hotel having a drink, waiting for the results. And the moment I arrived, luckily I bought flowers because I arrived. And the moment I saw her, she was like, "I made it to the finals." And we were staying with this lovely host family in Dunleary, which is a beautiful historic neighborhood in Dublin. It was my first time in Dublin. I loved it. And she had a day free in between. We explored the city, and I just knew deep in my soul that she was going to win because something was correct in the vibe. And she just knocked it out of the park, and the jury loved her. She was the deserving winner. These things sometimes are kind of funny, but she really deserved to win. She won. She met the president of Ireland. I got to meet Sir Thomas Allen, who is like the reason I started singing. When I was a teenager in Rochester, New York, my voice teacher, Thomas Paul. I don't know if you ever heard that name.
By name, yeah.
Yeah, he taught at the Eastman School of Music, and I was like 15 years old. Punk rock, skateboarding, playing soccer, and he was like, "You're going to be an opera singer someday. You need to listen to this man." And it was Sir Thomas Allen's CD, and I listened to it, and I was like, "That is extremely beautiful. I want to do that." And I had never met him, and this was a wonderful opportunity for me to tell him this story. And I told him, "You're the reason I became a baritone," and it was really great. And then directly after that, I met a woman, an Irish woman, who was also a Greenhalgh. And I did not know that there were Irish Greenhalghs, and she didn't know there were American Greenhalghs. So it was a lovely time. Yeah.
So Thomas Allen, really one of the greats, and he had He's retired, I believe, if I'm correct, officially from singing. He also was the rector of a university.
Yep. Yep.
He is one of the best teachers I've ever been present to watch.
Yep.
In the 2012, yes, Verbier Festival, we were four teaching artists. There was Thomas Allen, Ileana Kotrubash, Thomas Kwastoff, and Fred Plotkin. And and those three are, icons to me. And as a colleague, it was not my job to gush to them, but I made a point of going to all of their classes, and I was asked to converse in a public setting with them because I can speak. And Ileana Kotrubash was not available, and we substituted Anushka Shankar, the daughter of Ravi Shankar, talking about string music from India to Spain, and she was pretty wonderful. But Thomas Allen's classes, we were doing Le Nozze di Figaro as the study opera, and Ileana Kotrubash was a wonderful Susanna and so on. Her approach was very different from Thomas Kwastoff and different again from Thomas Allen. Thomas Allen got to the core of the theatricality of the moment.
Yes.
He basically said, this is theater. Yes, you're singing. And yes, you have to be a fantastic singer, and we're going to work on your musicality. And Kwastoff and Kotrubash did great jobs at that. Thomas Allen sort of felt that it was his job to inject the theatricality and to bring out whatever was inside these talented young artists we had, and leaving the music to others. And it was so interesting. I don't think they discussed it. I think that was just his choice, because clearly he could have done every musical element that was required. It was my job to be the historian, the dramaturg, whatever, everything relating to the history of that opera and Beaumarchais and so forth. And it was a thrilling experience, but I do have to say that I kept pinching myself that I was watching Thomas Allen teach.
Yeah.
And that was one of those cases where I felt that I, not young, not old, but I was middle-aged, still had so much to learn, and how exciting that was. That I could watch Thomas Allen and learn from Thomas Allen. That was pretty wonderful. And then, I'm not a pianist, but Alfred Brendel was the pianist in residence teaching Beethoven. And it was, hey, yes, we were up in the Swiss Alps and the air was thin already, but just every morning being able to go and sit among 30 people and learn from Alfred Brendel about Beethoven, then learn from Ileana Kotrubash, Thomas Kwastoff, and Thomas Allen was an amazing experience. So yes, I agree with you, Thomas Allen. I would love to have him on this program. I'm going to redouble my efforts to do that, but I have to get over my boy crush, my man crush, whatever we're going to call it, because he's really, really great actor. He played sinister. He played lovable. He played everything.
He can do it all.
He really is something. I won't say was. He's retired from singing, but he still is something. Yes. And how many singers are in their spare time the rector of a university?
Also an intellectual. I mean,
very much so, but not in a pretentious way.
No. He's a very charming, funny guy. And
So in preparing, I mean, I know you somewhat, but I always prepare for all these conversations. I discovered, I saw an announcement that you have become a ring announcer. Now, I must tell you, in full disclosure, when I heard that, I kind of pictured that you were narrating the Wagner tetralogy and saying, and here's Wotan entering the scene, and there's Fricka, and they're having an argument, and then there's the Rainbow Bridge. Because the kind of ring announcement you do is something I'm not in any way familiar with those sports. I don't watch those sports. I don't even like American football. It's too violent. To me, baseball is a beautiful game, and soccer, football is beautiful, and basketball is balletic. Tennis is very graceful and interactive. Swimming and diving are perfect. But I don't like combat sports. So I just assumed until I saw a video, and I realized, no, you are not announcing that here come the Valkyries. and they're carrying the dead heroes back to Valhalla. So,
Yes.
what is a ring announcer for you, and how did that happen?
Well, let me start from the beginning. So when I graduated from Juilliard, I found myself with a lot of free time on my hands, and
Yeah.
I lived in Astoria, Queens at the time. And so my best friend from Rochester was living with me. He was studying at Columbia, and he was a professional runner at the time, distance
Mhm.
ultra marathons. So we would run all the way to Washington Heights from Astoria down to the Empire State Building. We just did these massive runs around New York, and it was really inspiring. And I love athletics. I always played a lot of sports, and I had a phase where I was a bodybuilder. I just love mm, self development through athletics in any regard. Um, and I ran a marathon after he trained me. I ran the Hamptons Marathon actually, and I ran it in 3 hours and 27 minutes, which was first and only time I ran a marathon. And I was really thrilled that I
I
did.
didn't hear one word. It
Uh,
sounded like it began with letter H. You ran an
uh,
H marathon?
uh, Hamptons, New York.
Hamptons. Okay.
Hamptons. And I was in amazing shape physically. And I would go out. There was a small playground outside my apartment in Queens, and I would go out there sometimes in the evening because it was very safe at the time. And I would do some pull-ups or push-ups or whatever, just do some exercises. And I never had any problem. And one night I was doing pull-ups out there, and this guy came up to me, and he was very sketchy, and he took his shirt off and he tried to get aggressive with me, and he chased me around the park. And I thought to myself, this is like I'm in the best physical condition of my life right now. I have a six pack. I ran a marathon. I feel great. Just graduated from Juilliard. And I'm doing wonderful, but I don't know how to defend myself. And this guy would just beat me senselessly, and he wanted to. I ran away from him. But after that moment, I was like, I need to learn how to fight. And so I started to take different martial arts classes in New York, and then when I was in Vienna, I really studied Aikido because I really like the Zen aspect of it. I don't really love the brutality. Don't get me wrong. I like the self development and the finding the meditative peace through movement. That really piques my interest. And I've done probably 6 or 7 different martial arts since then. So it's been about 10, 11 years of training. Some of them more brutal than others. I have a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I've trained boxing, Western boxing,
What is
kickboxing.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is a ground combat sport that focuses on submissions. So, like, I know we're on a classical music podcast, but it's
No,
choking,
go for it.
arm breaking, leg breaking, etc. There's no punches. It's
In
just
other words, two sopranos.
I think every soprano could use one of
Hair
those.
pulling.
Hair pulling, kicking, and but it's turned into a kind of a global sport now. Actually, it's very popular. It's kind of like wrestling, shall I say? And I've done kickboxing, et cetera, et cetera. I've never competed or anything. I just do it as a hobby because I enjoy it. And I always start when I train. It's always about self development and finding peace and community and existing with other people in harmony. You have to trust people, have respect, loyalty. Every dojo or training hall, you develop these relationships, and they're very authentic. And that sometimes in the opera world, in the entertainment business in general, you get a little bit of fakeness, shall I say. In the martial arts world, if you're fake, you're found out within 1 second, and I love that. And so I was training at a boxing hall here, funny enough, called Brooklyn Finest. It's a Brooklyn-inspired gym in Essen. And their trainer, he thought I was hilarious because I was the only American guy that was training there, and he had fight nights for amateurs every 6 months or something. And he was like, Tobias, I know you're an opera singer. How funny would it be if you were a ring announcer for our fight nights? And funny enough, I sang an opera in Las Vegas of all places years ago. And every day when I drove to the university where we were rehearsing, I would see the UFC Performance Institute. The UFC is the Ultimate Fighting Championships. It's a global mixed martial arts organization, multi-billion-dollar company, very popular. And I thought to myself then, because I'm a fan of the sport, I was like, how cool would it be if an opera singer was a ring announcer? And then I looked at all these ring announcers up, and these guys, none of them have, maybe a few of them have some entertainment training, but none of them are trained opera singers. And I was like, I could do that. I sat on the idea for 5 years until this man asked me to do it. And I was like, yeah, actually, I forgot that I had that idea. I want to do this. And I went and I did it. And it was one of the most fun performances of anything I ever did. It was so dynamic and alive and just high energy and positive. And they train. It's the same as having a premiere for an opera. They're training for 6-7 weeks for this moment, and it's a celebration of sport, despite the fact that they're punching each other in the face. But yeah,
Now, because this is virgin territory for me completely.
sure.
I assume that the ring announcer is not in the ring, or is he?
Oh, he is. I'm the last
He's
person
in the ring.
My job is to fire the two fighters up before they fight. And my job is also to, I'm the master of ceremonies in general. So I'll start the evening, I end the evening. I give the sponsorship. If I do it on live television, I'm doing the sponsorship ads. I don't know if you know.
The beer company.
The beer company, the supplement company, the sport clothing company. It's my responsibility to write those advertisements and deliver them with pizzazz. But most importantly is that when there's two fighters, I call them to the ring. So fighting out of the blue corner is Fred Plotkin, yay! And then I call the other guy and have to get the audience riled up. So I have to come up with a bunch of catchphrases, which is really interesting work. I have to say, it's fun, it's creative, and I'm using my opera training because I'm lengthening vowels, doing all kinds of stuff, funny stuff like starting on a low note, then going up here, and then going up here, and ending here, and it's like singing, and the audience, I've gotten unanimous love from every audience that I've done it for.
And these are mostly in Germany?
Only in Germany, yeah. I'm actually now the ring announcer for the German MMA Championships, which is the biggest promotion in Germany. One of the biggest. And I'm streaming live on television whenever I do it. That's a new thing to learn.
So I can sort of, I don't know the language, but I'm just going to invent it. So, John Jones versus Mario Rossi in the ring. And now a word from our sponsor, Musiktheater Essen heute Abend die Fledermaus.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly it. But you always have to announce the height, the weight, and where they come from, and their fight team. Or if they have a nickname, fighters love nicknames, which is so much fun. Really, and actually, I have to develop a nickname. I don't have one yet. I'm coming up with one. I want to make it, hearkening to the opera world a little bit.
Daredevil.
Daredevil. That's a good one, actually. I like that.
You can have it, Daredevil.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you.
Not Il Divo, but Daredevil.
Yeah, very good. But it's totally different than the opera world, but very similar at the same time. And it's a mix of my career and my passions all in one. And I've gotten so many positive responses. I have so many connections now globally in the fight world that it's also a career now for me. It's not just a hobby anymore. So I'm really excited about it. Yeah.
In February, I had the wonderful American-based Morris Robinson on.
Oh, sure.
And he was an outstanding American football player in college. He was an All-American player.
Yeah.
And could have gone that route, but chose not to go that route and worked in technology for a while. And then his voice was discovered, and he relatively late went into opera and has had a big success. Yep. But he was very eloquent in our conversation, which people can find. It was February 14th. That about how the muscles and the emotional muscles required in athletics are the same that are required for singing opera.
That's part of the reason why I got involved also, not only to defend myself, but I remember reading a book. I forget the name of the book, but it had to do with developing a process for auditions for symphony players and singers. And there was a chapter about finding your dantian, which is like a point on your body directly under your belly button. And the author talked about Aikido and Kung Fu and how they use their muscles to find their center and their breathing muscles and their posture. And I was like, that is what I want to do. That is and from my experience, I mean, I do it every day now. It really does help, and it also helps not only with that, but something that is a challenge as an opera singer is staying together with the orchestra when you're on stage. If you, especially the alto theater, the stage is so wide. It's a huge stage, so the sound always has a delay, and you have to
Yeah.
look at different monitors and find the conductor. But you also have to. You don't want to just stand there and sing; it's boring. You want to be engaged and acting at every moment, but always having an eye wherever the conductor is. And through training, boxing actually, where a lot of speed bag and catching, trying to dodge punches and whatnot, it trains your eyes in such a way that whenever I'm
Hmm.
on stage, I feel really secure with my colleagues, being safe, the conductor. So there's many benefits to it, other than just the stated obvious one, self defense. But yeah, so it's a
Now you don't have to answer this, but if you answer it, I'll be glad to know the answer.
Mhm.
Um, my impression, I really don't look at these things much because I have no tolerance for violence at all,
Okay.
even feigned violence. I just cannot. I don't like the look of it.
Yeah.
I don't even like gunshots on the stage when somebody gets
Right.
shot in an op. And, Gino Yeagan, the duel. Mm.
Yes. Too much.
Um, so, but my impression, these guys, when they're in these different combats, always look like they're faking it, or they're in some kind of conflict where everything is pre-choreographed and we know who's going to go down, and
Right.
it doesn't feel genuine to me.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Well, it depends on the sport. If you're doing classical boxing, and let's say you have, like, there was a fight, Mike Tyson, the boxer, recently had a fight, and he's
Yeah,
50, 55 years old.
right.
The great debate was, is he really fighting or is he just faking it? Um, he's going to walk away with $20 million anyways. Did, you know, so that things like that are probably fake. Professional wrestling, not like collegiate wrestling. I'm talking about Hulk Hogan wrestling. That is completely fake. That is absolutely just theater. That is like going to the opera, but with giant hulking men. Mixed martial arts, the UFC, is the only purely safe one where it is not fake. Anything goes in that sport. So I mean, you can't do things to poke people's eyes. That's forbidden. But any kind of punch or kick, wrestling, it all goes, and that is very hard to fake. And yeah, so if that answers your question, I would say some of the boxing is fake. Professional wrestling is 100% fake. Mixed martial arts is, I would say, most of the time completely legit.
You're saying professional wrestling, but what I see in the Olympics referred to as Greco-Roman, where you tend to have people
Oh
from
yeah,
Bulgaria, Romania, Turkey,
yes,
that part of the world.
that's not
Mm,
fake.
that's not fake at all. I
Oh
know.
no,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's very. That I was going to say gripping. I'm not punning, but it's a very
yeah,
dramatic thing to watch
yes,
because they really are using their strength against one another
yep,
to pin
yes,
one down. I don't even like watching that.
yep.
But in the United States, I went to college in the Midwest in
Mhm.
Wisconsin and Illinois. And in our country, on the high school level, a lot of the best wrestling teams happen in the Midwest.
Of course, yeah,
And
yeah,
so I didn't ever go watch these events, but I had young men, boys who lived in my dorm in my freshman year who did that. And they always had black eyes and broken cheeks. And it didn't, you know,
it's
I needed my face for TV.
yeah. Which is why I don't train so hard anymore, and I'm getting
Okay.
more involved. I'm the guy. I get to be a part of the action in the biggest way without getting punched
Yeah.
in the face, and I think that that's wonderful. So yeah,
Well, it is exciting. And I know that you're going to grow into this in the way that you will work opera into it.
yeah, yep,
And I think that there's a valid place for there are people, men usually, but not always, who teach onstage combat, whether it's
yeah,
sword duels or wrestling or fighting or whatever, in a way that we hope the performers don't get injured, but nonetheless look effective and not like, some actor swinging his sword, 2 times. Like my
Yeah.
favorite tenor was Alfredo Kraus, but when he was 65 and dueling, he would sort of hold the sword up the sword, and someone would tap the sword, and that's the end of the fight.
Yeah.
Um, but nowadays, I think people look for more plausibility, in part because they have TV, they watch
Yep.
wrestling, they watch other fights on TV, and live, perhaps. What kind of audience comes? Is it mostly male? Is it mostly younger? Is it mostly
It,
what is?
the actually it's in Gelsenkirchen, the German MMA championships. That's why it's in
Well,
Gelsenkirchen. Yeah.
Marilyn Horne would have liked that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
She would
But
have. No, she's a huge sports fan.
oh,
Huge,
okay, okay. Then
huge.
she
I
would
can
have
tell you
been. Yeah.
stories.
Um, but amongst the younger population, the sport of mixed martial arts is extremely popular. It's the fastest growing sport in the world. It's only existed since around 1992 or so. The first tournament was held around that time in the early 90s, and it's had many progressions, and now it's a really an official sport. And it's really, really popular amongst the younger generation. It kind of caught me when I was like 23, because before that, I also thought, oh, this is so brutal. It's like no holds bar. It's too much blood. But now I've trained a bunch of martial arts, and I see the athletic aspect of it. And I got to be honest, when I'm there, most of the time, like I did a fight in January, and there were 40 fights, and only I saw one drop of blood. I mean, they didn't. Nobody got really seriously injured. They know they're so well trained. They know how to defend themselves. So it's more of like a chess match with your body. And if you
Hmm.
see it from that perspective, it's not so brutal. And then you enjoy the technical aspect of it. And, you see the heart of the fighters, and that's really
Yeah.
fun to watch. But
Just
yeah,
remembering that one of the people in my Aix-en-Provence group had met you in a yoga class in
that's
Brooklyn.
right.
I forgot
Yes,
about
yes, yes. I remember that. I remember
yeah.
that. I was like, this is some type of Jungian manifestation, Yeah.
So the guy who came up to you in Astoria, for people who don't know New York City, it's in the borough of Queens. It's
Hmm.
a very particular area because the largest population is Greek and the second largest is Egyptian. There are wonderful restaurants and clubs
Yeah.
there. Um, if I were exercising in a playground, it would be lifting the Greek pastries into my mouth. It would be because the best Greek pastries in New York City are there,
Yeah.
and the wonderful Greek tavernas and the Egyptian restaurants. And but it's also one of the main streets is called Steinway Street,
Greenway Street. Yep.
and
Yep.
you're in Germany. The Steinway Piano Company was originally in Germany, and they
Hmm.
came to New York more than 150 years ago and set up a factory in that part of Queens where you lived
Yep.
because there was a forest there. And the
Mm.
wood in that forest was the ideal wood for making pianos, better than anything they had in Germany. So they expanded their business primarily for the wood. People don't think of a forest in New York City, but there it was.
Yep.
And it became a company town built on the German model, so that
Hmm.
they had restaurants. You may remember that there were beer gardens in
Yes.
Astoria
Yes.
that you
Yep.
don't find much in the city. They were because of the Steinway Piano Company.
Really?
Um,
I didn't
they
know.
had German language classes in the schools in Astoria. The current high school of the performing arts, built by Tony Bennett and named for
Hmm.
Frank Sinatra, is in Astoria.
Hmm.
Tony Bennett was from Astoria. And it's a very special spot. Astoria itself, I believe, was named for John Jacob Astor.
Mm-hmm.
But the original area was known as Steinway
Hmm.
because it was a separate working village dedicated to making the best pianos in the world.
Mm.
And I won't say which are the best. They're wonderful pianos. I heard one the other night at Carnegie Hall and another one at Lincoln Center. They're wonderful pianos. And there's a showroom on 57th Street, but they're still manufactured in Queens.
Hmm.
And there's no longer the forest, but the technology, the sophistication of making something so beautiful and delicate remains there. And I love that you can go and visit the factory and then go get a Greek pastry.
Oh yeah, it was a wonderful place to live. My favorite
Yeah.
years in New York were spent in Astoria. It was really,
Yeah.
I miss it. I really do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Tobias, did I leave anything out? We had a good conversation, all kinds of topics.
I think that's pretty much it.
We went from wrestling with music to wrestling with.
Wrestling with the microphone. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm glad that my audience got to meet you. I look forward to seeing your progression vocally and
Thank you.
where you go.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very close to you now because you're the only other person I've ever met who had its frenulum cut.
Yeah.
So I've never had this conversation with anyone before.
Neither have I. So I'm delighted. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. And all good things. And next time I'm in Germany, I will come by Essen. I may not come to the Fight Club, but I'll definitely come to the Opera House.
Well, you can catch that on pay-per-view if you want. So you don't have to go in person.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
Baseball, yes. Swimming and diving and tennis, yes.
I'm also not beholden just to the combat sports. I might sing at some FIFA matches or something.
That definitely.
Yeah. I'm trying to get involved in the sports world in general.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I would love, and I mean this seriously, to see people who attend sports go to more opera and concerts. Because in New York, always we have people who are fans of baseball, either the Yankees or the Mets in the past, the Dodgers and the Giants, who are also huge opera fans. There's something about baseball that corresponds to opera, and the people who love one love the other. Because I say because of the protagonism involved, that if you're the pitcher, the catcher, the batter, you, for the moment, are the soloist, just the way a singer might be a soloist and then someone else sings.
Yeah.
And audiences, if they love that protagonism, as opposed to, say, a team like basketball or football, running and claiming territory and scoring points, baseball is not that.
Yes.
And that's why. So, but also soccer, football, whatever we call it.
Yeah.
It's pretty wonderful. I'm not going to ask you which team you root for in soccer because.
I don't want to.
If it's Essen, that's good.
Essen's good enough. Essen,
Okay. So, Tobias Greenhalgh, thank you so much, and I will see you again.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.